Welcome to the lecture entitled Scientific Progress as Intertheoretic Reduction. I'm Andrew Chapman. In this lecture, we'll discuss 8 topics. 1. The broad definition of theory and what theories do. 2. The classical view of scientific theories. 3. Scientific progress and scientific methodology according to the classical view. 4. The role of intertheoretic reduction in the classical view. 5. The range of admissible theories according to the classical view. 6. Theory replacement and the general impossibility of intertheoretic reduction. 7. Empirical evidence, non-empirical evidence, and the general impossibility of intertheoretic reduction. And 8. The upshot for practicing scientists in terms of scientific progress and scientific methodology. We might think that if we understand how science is generally practiced, the issues of demarcation, methodology, and progress, and the issues of explanation, prediction, and understanding, that there isn't much more for us to understand about the nature of science. While all of those issues are important to science, they're largely important precisely because of their relations to scientific theorizing, that is, to the creation, testing, acceptance, improvement, and abandonment of scientific theories. Thus, to understand science is to understand scientific theories, and to understand scientific theories is to understand science. We can learn how science is and ought to be practiced by examining scientific theorizing, and we can see whether scientists are behaving maximally rationally by looking at how they interact with scientific theories. In fact, in this lecture, we'll see that the notion of scientific progress that falls out of the classical view of scientific theories creates a number of issues for the classical view itself. So, scientific progress and the nature of scientific theorizing are tightly bound together in the topics that we'll discuss in this lecture. The central goal of science is to promote understanding of the natural world, and this understanding is achieved via explanations of natural phenomena, and these explanations of natural phenomena further allow for predictions of future natural phenomena. Scientific theories, then, are large-scale explanations of phenomena in general. Theories are sets of sentences and they're created by scientists, but this doesn't make theories merely subjective, since theories are only true and hence are only accurate and can only explain if they correctly describe reality as it actually is, apart from anyone's mere beliefs about reality. The goal of scientific theorizing, then, is to create theories that accurately describe the widest range of phenomena using as few explanatory facts as possible. Regularities in nature, that is, things that occur over and over again, natural laws, which are regularities that occur with necessity, scientific explanations, and scientific theories have a close relationship in what's known as the classical view of scientific theories. Specific phenomena, including regularities in nature that aren't laws, are explained by showing that these phenomena had to happen given certain boundary conditions and natural laws. What explains these specific phenomena is that they can be deduced from premises concerning boundary conditions and natural laws. This is the component of the classical view of science that's known as the deductive nomological model of scientific explanation. And the classical view is sometimes equated with the deductive nomological model, or one is subsumed under the other, but they are both part of the traditional picture of how scientific theorizing and explaining and predicting work. Now, what explains these natural laws? Well, the natural laws themselves can be explained by showing that they are derivable from even broader, more general laws, laws that take into account phenomena at a broader level of generality. This explaining laws in terms of broader laws is what the classical view calls scientific theorizing, and the connection between two levels of law is made by the scientific theory itself. So, if we're hoping to explain more specific laws in terms of more general laws, we need a scientific theory, according to the classical view, to connect the more specific to the more general. According to Ernest Nagel, who was one of the founders of logical positivism and one of the most vocal proponents of the classical view of scientific theories and scientific explanation, scientific theories contain three sorts of components that work together to provide explanations. The first component is an abstract calculus that is the logical skeleton of the explanatory system and that implicitly defines the basic notions of the system in terms of the other components of the system. The second component is a set of rules that in effect assign an empirical content to the abstract calculus by relating it to the concrete materials of observation and experiment. And the third component is an interpretation or model for the abstract calculus, which supplies some flesh for the skeletal structure in terms of more or less familiar conceptual or visualizable materials. The details of the classical view of scientific theories are somewhat complicated, and we don't need to get into them here. What's important to recognize is that logical relations between the components of a scientific theory are of the utmost importance to the classical view. According to the classical view, the three components of a theory work together to allow the theory to do the work that theories are supposed to do. The abstract structure, or calculus as Nagel calls it, is the heart of the theory that relates all of the terms of the theory to one another such that the theory is able to explain empirical phenomena by deriving those phenomena from other components of the theory. However, within the abstract structure itself, none of the terms actually relate to the empirical world. The abstract structure is just that. It's merely structural and merely abstract. This relating of the abstract structure to the empirical world is done via correspondence rules that explicitly define both empirical and theoretical terms in terms of possible experiences. And scientists make use of a theory via an interpretation of the abstract structure of the theory. An interpretation is the result of applying correspondence rules to the entire abstract structure of the theory in order to get statements that are fully meaningful and empirically relevant, that we can understand on a practical level rather than on a merely abstract level. According to the classical view, successful scientific theorizing is the explaining of some scientific explanation in terms of more general laws, where this explaining comes in the form of deriving the less general laws from the more general laws. This picture of successful scientific theorizing also supplies us with a picture of scientific progress and a methodology for successful scientific practice. Science progresses, according to the classical view, when the less general can be derived from the more general. Thus, the ultimate goal of science is to find the most general laws that describe the natural world and from which less general laws can be derived. Consequently, the goal of scientists should be to discover laws and develop theories that increasingly broaden the phenomena that science can account for. So, ultimately, according to this picture, scientists should be aiming to find one general set of laws from which all other specific laws can be derived. Intertheoretic reduction is a somewhat complicated technical term, but it simply means reduction of one theory to another. And reduction here simply means explanatory or conceptual reduction. Now, explanatory or conceptual reduction are also somewhat complicated technical terms, and they mean the translation of one set of statements into the language and concepts of another set of statements without losing any of the content or the meaning of the first set of statements. Since the classical view of scientific theories holds that scientific progress has been made when one scientific explanation or set of laws can be explained in terms of another scientific explanation or set of laws, and since, according to the classical view, this explanation is accomplished by deducing the one explanation from the other, well, then, according to the classical view, intertheoretic reduction is the driving force of scientific progress. If I want to make scientific progress, then I should take the set of scientific laws and explanations that I have right now, find laws and explanations that are more general, and show how it's possible to deduce the more specific from the more general, or in other words, show how it's possible to reduce the more specific to the more general. So this is our picture of scientific theories and of scientific progress according to the classical view. And intertheoretic reduction is essential for making scientific progress according to the classical view. However, there are a number of problems with equating scientific progress and intertheoretic reduction. One of the strongest critics of this picture of scientific progress as intertheoretic reduction is the philosopher of science, Paul Feyerabend. Feyerabend was a philosopher of science who was most famous for his position of epistemological anarchism, as it was called. That's the thesis that there are no universal rules for achieving knowledge. His most famous work, called Against Method, is one where he applies epistemological anarchism to the history and methodology of science in order to claim that there are no universal scientific rules, universal scientific methodologies that will produce scientific knowledge or scientific understanding. According to Feyerabend, the view of scientific progress entailed by the classical view of scientific theories is false, and it's false both normatively and descriptively. The normative is about what ought to be the case, and the descriptive is about what is the case. So, when Feyerabend claims that the classical view's picture of scientific progress is false normatively, what he's claiming is that scientists oughtn't or shouldn't take it to be their goal in scientific theorizing to make progress in the way that the classical view says they should. And it's false descriptively because scientists do not actually take it to be their goal in scientific theorizing. Feyerabend claims that this view of scientific progress, where scientific progress is made via intertheoretic reduction, is false both normatively and descriptively because he holds that, in general, it's impossible for scientists to reduce a scientific theory to some successor theory in order to make scientific progress. If such intertheoretic reduction is impossible, then intertheoretic reduction is not actually practiced in science, since scientists don't do the impossible. And it shouldn't be attempted, since for scientists to sit around and attempt to do the impossible would be a waste of their time. Let's look at why Feyerabend says that intertheoretic reduction is not possible, and hence that it isn't and shouldn't be viewed as the driving force of scientific progress. A secondary science is a theory that can be reduced to a primary science, and when such reduction is completed, scientific progress has been made. This is simply Feyerabend's terminology for the picture of scientific progress entailed by the classical view of scientific theories. So, if there are these relations between primary and secondary sciences in scientific practice and the history of science, then the classical view would be vindicated. However, Feyerabend says this view of the relation between primary and secondary sciences is false. So here's an example for you of the relation between primary and secondary sciences. Imagine that we have a set of explanations, and these explanations deal exclusively with the orbits of planets. They don't tell you anything else other than about the orbits of planets. If a new set of explanations comes along that deals with all of the phenomena relevant to gravitational forces, then our set of explanations about planetary orbits could be made sense of in terms of our set of explanations about gravitational forces. So here in this example, we have a secondary science, the science that deals with planetary orbits, being reduced to a primary science, our science that deals with gravitational forces. In this example, scientific progress would have been made if we reduced our secondary science to our primary science, according to the classical view. In order to make scientific progress according to the classical view, it's not the case that simply any theory will do. Since scientific progress is only possible via intertheoretic reduction, according to the classical view. There's a narrow set of theories that will be admissible as theories that make scientific progress from where we are now. And those are theories that the current theory could possibly be reduced to. So Feyerabend says, only such theories are admissible for explanation and prediction in a given domain, which either contain the theories already used in this domain or are at least consistent with those theories. So, if a new theory is merely an expansion of a past theory, then reduction from old to new will be possible. Barring that, new theories must at least not contradict old theories, since reduction between two contradictory theories is not possible. So why is it that intertheoretic reduction requires consistency between old and new theory? First, just some terminology. If two sets of sentences are consistent, then it's at least possible for all of their constituent sentences to be true at the same time. And if they're inconsistent, then it must be the case that at least some of their constituent sentences are false. So imagine that I tell you that I agree with you concerning your assessment of some situation. You tell me something and I say, oh yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I say, but I want to just re-describe what you've said in some clearer terms. If I then go on to say things that contradict your assessment, then you would rightly say, hey, you don't agree with me at all. You're saying that my assessment is incorrect and you're replacing it with your own assessment. This is exactly analogous to intertheoretic reduction. If an old theory is to be reducible to a new theory, then the new theory must preserve all of the claims of the old theory, even if new language or new concepts are used to express those old claims. Thus, consistency between theories is required in order for one theory to possibly be reducible to the other. However, says Feyerabend, it's precisely this requirement of consistency between old and new theories that makes intertheoretic reduction impossible. If consistency between theories is required for intertheoretic reduction, then intertheoretic reduction is, in general, impossible, says Feyerabend. The reason for this is that, in general, scientific progress is made by replacing old theories with new theories, and not by creating new theories that are additions to old theories or consistent with old theories. If scientific progress were generally made by simply adding on to old theories or not negating any component of old theories, then old theories would be able to be reduced to new theories. However, if scientific progress is instead generally made by throwing out old theories and replacing them with new, inconsistent theories, then the content of the new theories is at odds with and hence inconsistent with the content of old theories. And if this is the case, then old theories cannot be reduced to new theories, and hence intertheoretic reduction is impossible. When scientists tinker within theories, their goal is to retain the theory, but to fix up internal bits of the theory that are not functioning optimally in terms of explanation or prediction. However, According to the classical view, this wouldn't technically be scientific progress since we aren't changing theories but are instead retaining a theory and just messing around with its internal bits. In general, when a theory is changed, it's changed because of serious problems with the old theory. To then move to a new theory that was consistent with this old theory would be to retain these serious problems, but this would defeat the entire purpose of theory change. Why change theories if you're not actually changing anything? And even further, we might think that one of the main reasons for changing theories is because scientists believe that an old theory has gotten things wrong about the world, that the old theory is false, and they hope that their new theory gets things right, is true. Were the new theory consistent with the old theory, the new theory wouldn't be different enough from the old theory for scientists to legitimately hope that they had left behind the inaccuracies of the old theory. If scientists said, yeah, our old theory is false and inaccurate, but we're just going to invent a new theory that keeps around all of those falsehoods and inaccuracies, we might wonder what scientists are doing. But, of course, Feyerabend is saying this isn't how scientists actually behave. When scientists change theories, they replace old theories with new theories, and that's a problem for the classical view, not for science. So let's look at an example of theory change. According to Aristotelian physics, a central reason why objects move the way that they do is because of an inner nature of the object that directs the object to some new position, sort of like a metaphysical engine within the object. This inner nature is the object's telos, or its natural end state. According to Newtonian physics, however, which replaced Aristotelian physics because of Newtonian physics's superior explanatory and predictive abilities, objects move the way they do because of external forces that are acting upon the object, not because of internal forces. So the move from Aristotelian physics to Newtonian physics drops the notion of an object's telos, or internal nature. And according to Einsteinian physics, which replaced Newtonian physics, again due to Einsteinian physics's superior explanatory and predictive abilities, the forces that are described by Newtonian physics give an incomplete and inaccurate picture of the relation between movement and the structure of spacetime. So Einsteinian physics drops components of the description of forces that were present in Newtonian physics. In each one of these theoretical changes, something was thrown out entirely such that the new theory isn't consistent with the old theory. It can't be the case that both Einsteinian physics and Newtonian physics are true. It can't be the case that both Aristotelian physics and Newtonian physics are true. The reason for this is that the old theory is taken to be false. The new theory is taken to be true, or at least better than the old theory. And why would we want to retain false information in new theories? While it's sometimes the case that scientists change theories because of new empirical evidence or new evaluations of old empirical evidence, this often isn't the case. Oftentimes, scientists change theories due to conceptual reasons, such as considerations of simplicity or internal consistency or consistency with other theories or considerations of logic or mathematics, or due to considerations of theoretical entities, non-empirical entities within theories. However, conceptual reasons and considerations of theoretical entities aren't empirical in nature. No empirical evidence is relevant to these reasons or considerations. Consider the change from a geocentric model of the solar system to a heliocentric model of the solar system, where a geocentric model is one that says that the Earth is the center of the solar system, and a heliocentric model is one that says that the Sun is the center of the solar system. A heliocentric model was preferred because of its simplicity, among other things. And in fact, all theories are just like this. For any theory and some set of supporting empirical data for that theory, there are many, in fact, infinitely many, different and mutually incompatible scientific theories that differ solely in terms of their non-empirical content. So, it's not just the case that theory change has to make sense of new empirical content such that old and new theory have to be different from each other. It's the case that new theories have to make sense of new non-empirical content as well. So we have two different reasons why theories change, and for both reasons, stuff in the old theory is thrown out and completely replaced with inconsistent stuff from the new theory. And if this picture that Feyerabend is giving of how science actually works is correct, then it's not possible to retain all of the data from the old theory. And if it's not possible to retain all of the data from the old theory, then intertheoretic reduction isn't possible. And even further, while the available empirical evidence might validate two theories when those theories are considered in isolation from one another, it does not validate both theories when those theories are combined and considered as a theoretical package. Intertheoretic reduction requires us to see theories as theoretical packages, since both theories must be capable of being true at the same time for some reduction to be possible. What Feyerabend is pointing out to us is that according to the classical view of scientific theories and the view of theory change that is entailed by the classical view, the evidence that we have for one scientific theory just is the same sort of evidence that we would have for another scientific theory. However, this isn't the case. Different scientific theories that might, if you view them independently of each other, have good evidence, might not, if you combine them with each other, have good evidence. The standards of empirical corroboration for a theory are dependent on the scale and generality of the theory itself. These standards of empirical corroboration include how specific the measurements need to be, how much data is required in order to accept the theory, etc. When we're considering a less general theory, measurements might not need to be particularly specific. However, when this less general theory is considered in light of a more general theory, as is required by considerations of intertheoretic reduction, the less specific theory's measurements might begin to seem inexact and dubious. But this problem does not affect a picture of scientific progress in which scientific progress is made via replacement rather than via intertheoretic reduction. So what Feyerabend is pointing out is that the way that scientists actually behave is at odds with what the classical view says is required in order for scientific progress to be made. In sum, then, since the classical view of scientific theories requires that scientific progress be made via intertheoretic reduction, and since such reduction is generally impossible due to the fact that progress is usually made by theory replacement, the picture of scientific progress entailed by the classical view must be false. Either that or scientific progress has never actually been made, but that's highly doubtful. This falsity of the classical view's picture of scientific progress comes in both descriptive and normative varieties. Descriptively, scientists do not actually attempt, nor have they ever attempted, to make progress by reducing old theories to new theories. And normatively, scientists shouldn't attempt to make progress by reducing old theories to new theories. Since science has generally been successful by replacing old theories with new theories, that replacement model ought to be the goal of practicing scientists. That is, if scientists want to continue making progress, they should do what they're already doing. This isn't to say that philosophers of science shouldn't be trying to figure out what it is that scientists are doing that makes them successful. Feyerabend is giving us a proposal here. Scientists replace old theories with new theories for all sorts of reasons. What it is saying is that the classical view of scientific theories and the view of scientific progress that's entailed by the classical view is not getting correct how scientific progress works. In this lecture, we've discussed 8 topics. 1. The broad definition of theory and what theories do. 2. The classical view of scientific theories. 3. Scientific progress and scientific methodology according to the classical view. 4. The role of intertheoretic reduction in the classical view. 5. The range of admissible theories according to the classical view. 6. Theory replacement and the general impossibility of intertheoretic reduction. 7. Empirical evidence, non-empirical evidence, and the general impossibility of intertheoretic reduction. And 8. The upshot for practicing scientists in terms of scientific progress and scientific methodology. Thank you.